apparently for the video I need to stand here, so I apologise for the crick in your neck. Can you hear me at the back? Yeah? Brilliant. Dungeon Master's Guide to Crisis Management. No Dungeons & Dragons experience is needed, but by this point everyone's seen Stranger Things, so you know enough about it anyway. First of all, crisis management. Most organisations, have some sort of crisis plan. Yeah? Who has a crisis plan in their organisation? Most might have been a stretch. Who has multiple crisis plans for different crises? Who's tested them? I swear a hand went up there that wasn't up for the first two. But we all know that's the problem, and when those tests do happen, they're more about compliance and annual testing than they are about actually surviving a crisis, which is difficult and takes a different skill set to writing a crisis plan. So, the problem we have with a crisis plan, first of all, who knows what the magician's rule is? Narrative trope.
Is it on the slide?
It's not on the slide. Well, it is on the slide, but that's not the point. Fireball solves it all is one option. There is a valid option in a crisis plan of saying, actually, we're going to just let the company fold to minimise damage. That is a valid option that should be on your crisis plans. Dissolve the organisation. It's an option which is used by group companies. They move all of the bad assets into a particular subsidiary, and then they fold it. And takes all of the debt, all of the liabilities, everything. If you know Avon and watch what's happened with the powder and the liabilities around that, that's exactly what they've done. So, yes, collapsing the company, Fireball solves everything. But the magician's rule. In narrative fiction, if you see what's going into a plan, the preparation of it, you know that plan will fail later in the story. Because it has to, otherwise you've lost all the tension. The only plans that work are the ones that don't get talked about on the screen. And weirdly, that does apply to a large degree in reality, because any detailed plan for a crisis will not work in a crisis. Anyone know why a detailed plan won't work in a crisis? If you're in the middle of a crisis, you're not getting the 5th volume down, flicking to page 267 and saying, right, what's step 1? Oh, panic. So, any detailed plan for a crisis is unfit for a crisis. That's a lie. There are ways to make it work. But we'll move on. I wrote this talk because games was a theme here, but also because I'm a big believer in play being how we learn, not just when we're toddlers, but also as adults. The sad thing is, you go to organisations and say, well, I want to run a few games and game out some scenarios and sit down with your people and work things through, and they go, oh, well, that sounds childish. And then 2 days later, they get ransomwared and the company collapses. But who's played Dungeons & Dragons? That's enough of you. And the rest of you, I'm assuming, know something about it. Who's been the DM or the GM? And who out there is my fellow forever DMs? Forever DMs. The ones of us who get stuck never being able to play because we've always got to run the game. So, I want to be clear. This is all opinion. It's not fact. Yeah? This is my own completely biased opinion. You are allowed to disagree, but if you do, pop up and see me at the bookshop, buy a book, and you can argue all you want. Good GMs plan out a few storylines, or buy one of the module books and they know what they're going to go through. Choose your own adventure type stuff. You will have seen that in crisis scenarios, where it's nicely scripted out, you've got a couple of options at each step. Any monkey can run it because they can just go through and click through and say, are you picking A or B? Great GMs plan for every contingency. That's the ones where they script it out and are you going for A, B, C, D, blah, 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 Z. The really good GMs, we're the lazy ones. We do as little planning as possible because then the players can do all of the work. So instead of saying, I'm going to plan out what they're going to do at each step, You sit down and you go, here's a situation. Here's the world as it is. I'm going to drop my players into it, and then I'm going to see what happens and react to what they do and improvise. This comes down to world building versus railroading. Two different approaches to D&D and to running crisis scenarios, usefully. It's almost like I thought the analogy through. So most exercises, and this really is most, even if you look at the NCSC exercise in a box, it's following this. They are designed to follow a set path. So you drop people into it, you have a set of injects that you give them. That's could be emails, it could be network logs, anything that you're giving them to feed into the world. And you give them a few different options they can follow. Tick, tick, tick. Great, well done. The biggest problem I have with that is that in a crisis, the hardest thing to learn is making decisions. We've already discussed that the detailed plan doesn't work. So what you really want out of scenario exercises is to teach people this is how you make decisions under pressure, and you accept that they may be wrong. And these scripted exercises, the railroads, don't do that, because the only one who's making meaningful decisions there is the person who wrote the scenario. Even better, if you're lazy like me, if you get the players to do the work and make the decisions, it's a lot less effort for you. You just need to know the world well enough that you can react properly, and then you leave them to it. So, you set up the scenario. Here we are in Glorantha, or the data center just burned down. It's a scenario. It's one you can use. Drop in the key assets. It's an organization. Now, when I say system, because that's interpreted different ways, if I say an organizational system, I am referring to something that may or may not include technology, governance and documentation processes, people, suppliers, could be wider society, anything. All of these are components of a system. So you look at the system and you say, well, here's the assets we care about in it. We care about our people, we care about this office, we care about that server, that information asset, we care about the bank vault, whatever it might be. You drop them into the scenario, and then you just break something. Tell the players and see what they do. Really is as simple as that. You let them do the work, because they can tell you what will then break, what the consequences will be, what they'll do about it. And the best bit is, because it's all a game, it doesn't matter if they get it wrong. And if they do get it wrong, it's an opportunity to say, okay, this is the consequence of that, without burning down the data center. It's great. I once flooded Berlin and they didn't even notice. When you plan, every written plan has assumptions. They're built on assumptions. Now, building on assumptions, a bit like building on polystyrene or quicksand, they break, but no one actually notices them until they break. So when you're constructing one of these scenarios, when you're preparing one of these exercises, explore what people are assuming. Spend some time talking to them. Understand what they assume will happen. Oh yeah, the CTO will be reachable. He always is. Well, no, now he's on London Underground. And there's been a breakdown, so he's stuck there for the next 7 hours. No signal, no way to reach him. And turns out they were a key dependency. My favourite one, if you're ever an external running a scenario for a company, yeah, the head of operations who hired you is always the head of operations. You tell them, you're on holiday, you've got no phone signal, I want you to sit there and watch what happens without you. It destroys them utterly. Because every head of operations thinks, oh, everyone can do it, that it can cover for me. And they do not realise how much they are the linchpin of an organisation. By the way, I spent way too long getting the formatting right on these. So, I'm going to give you a few tools. Yeah. First one, the assumption map. You take a spreadsheet, you list out the assumptions, You list out ways that you can break those during the game. You don't have to use all of them, but you just need those options available so that you can throw them in. Here's another great thing about games. Yeah, we can go full timey-wimey Doctor Who. You can say, okay, Office 365 is down. Well, turns out that's existential. There is no recovery. Okay, you know what? We'll row back. We're not going to take down Office 365. Instead, Salesforce is down. Everyone cheers. But list out the assumptions and list out how they can break. Was trying to see who'd get the reference there. A few of you did. The party, your players, will always do the unexpected. They will always go off script. Now, that's fun. If you're working to a scripted scenario, it's a disaster because you end up trying to pull them back on track. Someone will always do something unexpected. This is a scenario I ran some years ago. I'm going to emphasise it was not a serious scenario, it was a demonstration. But things did get off the rails a little bit. And for those of you who know Scott McGreedy, just be aware that during an ICO notifiable data breach, he decided to invade the North Pole and try to blow up Santa's workshop. Yeah, that's the type of person he is. But no, you've got options. You can say, oh, you know what? I want to pull it back on track. All of this stuff you're doing over there, that's not really relevant. Here's the script I've got. And you do that, and everyone looks crestfallen, and you have destroyed every possibility of learning because now you're just programming them. Go and do amateur theatre if you want to tell people what to do. Do not bring things back on track, but do have random encounters. Goes back to that assumption map, goes back to other things. Have stuff you can throw in. You're not saying, I want to pull you back to the main line of the script. You are saying, oh look, here's something that's gone wrong because of that. There's a kobold in the server room. So have a list of random encounters. You can have them just generic. They don't have to be for a specific scenario. They are just things you can drop in as it starts to slow down or as it goes too far off to pull people's attention without saying, no, stop doing that. Bad players. The other part of it, I was saying, build the scenario, build the world. Yeah, save the cheerleader, save the world, that type of thing. Oh, now I feel old. Stock the dungeon. If you are doing a scenario, if you're doing an instant scenario, there is someone behind it. They may be malicious, they may be negligent, but they want something, and that is the course they are pursuing. They are not going to be static as your players solve the problem. They are going to be making decisions as well. Another really good tip, if you want to make the CISO really, really happy, you pull them out of the scenario and tell them to grab a couple of their favourite analysts and sit them down and say, right, you're the red team. You are the aggressors in this. So I want you to target things because that CISO knows every single flaw in the organisation, if they're good, and given the opportunity to exploit it and make people to learn valuable lessons, they will take it. And they will do horrendous things to their own organisation, all in play. So, Toolkit 2, the improv toolkit. I did try to get the improv meme thing, I couldn't find it. But the point is, think through a few wildcards, don't go too deep, don't overthink, get used to thinking on the fly. Get used to just reacting. This is a lot easier if you have someone to take notes, so you can just focus on producing the scenario and running people through it. But when they say, okay, we're going to invade the North Pole with eagles, Scott, you can go, right, well, this is what happens. Actually, they've got flying elves. They can deal with that. Seriously, though, think through, okay, what could they do that would make things go horrendously wrong or would make the whole scenario trivial? One example where I utterly failed and partly learnt this lesson was a client wanted me to do a scenario with an invasion of an Eastern European company where many of their developers were. This was after the invasion of Ukraine, so they had learned lessons. And when I started presenting that, they said, we've got a plan for this. We have an arrangement to buy a resort in Turkey, charter private planes, and fly out our developers, their family and pets to this safe area. It will only cost us about $2 billion. Sometimes you cannot improvise your way out of a response. Yeah. There are organisations who will just go, we'll throw money at it. This was the same one where I flooded Berlin. That meant that they had one of their services, only one, had a criticality period of less than a week, and it needs to be within 5 minutes. So their response to that was, well, it's only $100 million worth of business, we'll write it off. Be ready for that sort of thing when you're dealing with large companies. They do not operate in the real world. So, you've done the scenario, it's gone brilliantly, everyone's had a lovely time, they're incredibly stressed now because you've been piling pressure on, you've made it feel like it's time sensitive. Before we go into this, who knows about stress inoculation? Right. One of the points, for me, really one of the key points of doing these scenarios is stress inoculation. So what happens is, the more you deal with stress, the better you get at dealing with stress. It's shocking. It's almost like humans are adaptable and can learn. So if you are giving artificial stress and artificial time pressure and negative consequences, and you're putting ChatGPT generated images of the CEO being bombarded by hate mail, whatever it may be, so it feels real to them, and you keep the pace going, that is genuine stress that they're going through. And then when they are actually in a crisis scenario, that will be a nice, warm, comforting, familiar feeling of panic to them. But more importantly, they will know how to function in that environment. They will know how to make a decision. They will know that sometimes making the wrong decision is still better than sitting there and doing nothing. Being wrong quickly is often much better than being right later. Anyway, you've gone through that, you've given them the stress inoculation, you've sat down and you said, now we're going to have a quiet coffee so the adrenaline can go down. I do recommend that about every 2 hours of a scenario exercise, otherwise it is really hard on people if you're doing it right. So you debrief, you want to get the XP. Hero's Journey, another narrative device. Lord of the Rings is the hero's journey. You get to normality at the end. Normality may no longer be recognisable, but it's still there. Scenario exercise, you sit down and you do the debrief. There's tricks to doing a debrief. Yeah. Now, this is going to be quite a niche reference. I will recognise some of you as fellows, depending on the reaction. About 3 or 4 readers, okay. There is always in that room a main character. It might be the CEO, it might be a charismatic analyst, but it will be someone. And when you're doing the debrief, they will speak first. And not necessarily deliberately, but they will control the narrative. They will take it over. Everyone suddenly agrees with them. Now that is absolutely awful. Because what you really want is the plurality of voices and the different accounts to find out where they disagree and where people think different things. And the moment you've got consensus, you've lost all of that. So the main character is incredibly dangerous. And the way you deal with that is before you say to everyone, right, tell me what happened, write it down. Yeah, that can be in one-to-one interviews. It can be just sitting in silence for 5 minutes, which is great because then you're getting people to calm down as well. But before people start talking things through, get those individual accounts down. They don't need to be identifiable. They can be anonymous because there are cases where someone might want to raise something that they are afraid to have attributed to them. You need to give that level of protection, but get those individual accounts. That fixes, to a large degree, the main character syndrome, because now you have not all the information, but at least the different perspectives. Then you go through those accounts, and this is probably a few days later, and you say, okay, what if this happened here? What if we did this there? What if they did that then? You go through that timeline, or timelines if you've done more than one scenario, and just say, we'll explore out a bit. We're not going to do a full scenario exercise again, because you are busy people, and more than an hour of your time is incredibly valuable, and I know budget, blah, 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 plus I'm expensive and you don't want me for a whole other day. But go through those what-ifs and just branch out, and then you've got a better idea. This isn't how you write a plan, it's how you get people thinking about it, and thinking about it is the really important bit, because the more they think about it, the better prepared they are. They don't need a detailed step-by-step plan. They need a toolkit of how to make decisions in a sane way in a crisis. And who's doing what when? Who's wearing which hats? Taking literal hats along and putting them on people's heads actually works. And swapping hats between people mid-scenario or between different scenarios, really good. Because if you put the head of marketing in charge of the SOC, and you put the head of legal in charge of marketing and reputational management, they learn lessons about each other having different priorities and different incentives. And those are really useful lessons, because organisations, now this is a big secret, organisations do not have one singular unified purpose. They've got a lot of moving parts, moving in different directions and trying to achieve different things, and sometimes those conflict. So making people wear different hats helps them learn that. But you also need to say who's actually doing this, who can do it for them, because the CTO is stuck on the London Underground for the next 7 hours. So who's going to be acting in their stead? Identify the roles, identify who holds the roles, and identify every single one of those which does not have a fallback, which will be, just to save time, the head of operations. CEO is easily replaceable, we don't care about that one. CTO, if they're leading development, they will be the one that's critical and doesn't have a delegate. And probably one of the analysts. The CISO is replaceable, but there's that one person who's been there 10 years and knows everything. So, tool number 3. We've got a spell this time, by the way. It's this whole debrief thing is how you get XP. You don't level up during the adventure, you level up at the end as you sit down and you consolidate everything you've learned. So, sit down, talk it through, explore the what-ifs, decide who's doing what or not doing what. That's where people actually get value out of it. The scenarios themselves are fun, but you can run those and get absolutely nothing if you're not doing an effective debrief. Nearly done. And I think I'm on time. Yeah, there we go. Rulings, not rules, is an approach to running tabletop RPGs. It's based on the idea that you, as the GM, make decisions based on what's cool or fulfilling or interesting or fun, instead of following the rules to a minute degree. Now, if you're running a crisis scenario, you have to some degree, follow the rules of reality, unless you've got Scott McCready and Santa's there and there's eagles invading the North Pole. But you want to follow reality, but you don't need to make it completely detailed. You can pull that out in the debrief instead. You make rulings based on what's useful to learn and understand at any particular time. Now, congratulations, you made it through the whole talk. That's a couple of pages of text just blathering about what I've been blathering about, if anyone wants reminders. And you've got the treasure, you've got the XP. Any questions?
Do you often find that smaller organisations are any better because they might know a bit more about?
Yes. So it gets interesting. Smaller organisations I often find are either much, much better or completely useless. And when I say completely useless, it's because they just haven't been through that situation. So one of our clients is about 24 people. They have had a number of incidents over the years, not due to us. I'll point out we're on retainer to help them, not to fix things for them. But On the first one, they were in an absolute panic. The main thing I had to do there was answer the phone and say, calm down, talk me through what's going on. I didn't actually have to give any advice. I just had to get them to stop panicking. The last time they had an incident, I had a phone call from them saying, James, we've had this, done this, this and this. Are we missing anything? Nope, you're great. So they can learn really quickly because it's not dispersed in the same way. Larger organisations are much more fragile because you've got more moving parts. You can't get them all in the same room so easily. They don't understand what the other parts are doing. And so you might have the security team spinning off into the distance going, we need to notify the ICO, we need to do that, we need to do this. Well, meanwhile, the marketing team are going, yeah, but the website's down, and that's £2 million per minute we're losing. So yes, smaller organisations I find can improve quicker. They've got less inertia. They tend to be better when they're good, but they also suffer more from just not having been through it.
Any other questions for James? Oh, at the front.
Yeah. Going back to your main character problem, how do you go about eliciting from the various people in the room the other sort of narrative?
So there is the option of getting them to write it down. That's one. Depending on the size of the scenario and how many facilitators I have, splitting people out and having one-to-one interviews, if necessary, even if you can't cover everyone, splitting out into small groups so that you can at least get something. But the best thing is get everyone to just sketch down what they think happened for 5 minutes, 15 minutes afterwards in silence, so they're not talking to each other and not discussing. It is a really tough question on how to do it.
That back to the group,
Oh, you then compile that all together later, and you go back later on to say, right, this is what we learned from it.
Any more for James? Oh, at the back. I like this one.
You mean in terms of you've presented something or given an inject and they're just going...
Those are awesome.
Now, interestingly, that's not a problem I've ever encountered. And that might be because I'm perfectly willing to go, okay, it's too secure. So that means your CISO did it because they've got the access. They've been paid millions by Russia to go and do it. And very quickly you find that they're willing to suspend disbelief instead of being blamed. But no, it's not something I've had to deal with often. Force of personality is my best bet. Yeah. Any other questions? I will be upstairs on the bookstall. So, like I said, come buy a book and you can argue with me all you want. Thank you.